Well, the world has still gone nutty, buddy, even downright cruddy, buddy. Wish I missed the past, buddy, but there's still Buddycast. No, don't be naughty, go meet buddy, here on Buddycast.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and host of Buddycast, Nick Sorensen.
Welcome back, buddies, to another episode of everybody's favorite show, Buddycast. I'm your host, Nick Sorensen. Joining me today is a very special buddy. You've seen him on Buddycast before, or you've known him as a legendary guitarist from multiple bands, from the Elton John Band, from Hall & Oates. He's even a pastor today. My buddy, Caleb Quaye. How you doing today, Caleb?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Nick. Good to be with you.
Hey, we're happy to have you back on the show. You know, you're a great buddy, and I told you you're welcome back anytime you have something to promote. And you actually do have something to promote, you know?
Yeah.
So first off, I got to ask, how have you been since your last appearance on Buddycast?
I can't remember when my last appearance was. I think it was last year sometime.
Yep, last year.
I think since then, last year was kind of rough for me in terms of physicality. I had to undergo some spinal surgery back in September. And thank God I've recovered from that just fine. So from September onward, prior to that, I was in a lot of pain walking around, using a walking stick and stuff, So last year was pretty rough, but thank God by his grace, I'm all good today. I don't have to use a walking stick or anything, And so I'm doing good. Yeah.
Awesome. Glad to hear you've made a good recovery, a good speedy recovery.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you praise God for it. I'm happy to hear that too.
Absolutely.
All glory to him.
Yeah.
So, buddy, we've got some news coming up for you. You've got a documentary coming out.
Finally, yeah. It's been 12 years doing this thing.
12 years in the making. Wow.
12 years in the making. Yeah. And yes, and so finally it's going to be released on this coming Friday. Yeah, this Friday. Today's Monday. That's right. So this Friday, the 28th.
Nice.
4:30 p.m. What we're doing is the distribution company, they're doing a first. It's the first online worldwide online premiere for this movie. So it's being shown, the link is being sent out, worldwide. It's available worldwide. It's free. And and it's preceded with a half-hour interview with myself and the director of the movie, and then it goes straight into the movie. And that link is available for the month of May, and then after that, it goes to other streaming platforms.
Yeah.
Nice.
So the title of it is Louder Than Rock.
Louder Than Rock. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's the same title as my book, my autobiography. So the movie is based on the book, and it's my life story, which is a pretty interesting story.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, for our buddies out there who maybe aren't familiar with it, could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I'll try not to give too much away.
Don't spoil the ending now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's my life story, and I was born into a musical family, but it also it details the origins of Elton John's career, which I was very much involved in. I was his, we met when we were teenagers, and I was the guy that got him and Bernie Taupin signed to Dick James Music. I was his first producer and first, lead guitar player. So I was very involved in his music right from the very beginning, for the first, I guess, 10 years of it. And So I think you'll find some unique information in there that you won't find anywhere else. Because my story, especially with regards to his career, it's the only first-person account written by somebody who was actually there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I got to ask, you've been with bands, as you mentioned, Elton John, you've been with Hall & Oates.
Yeah.
You give us some stories from those times?
Gosh.
I know you probably got a billion of them, but
Yeah, it was a unique time. Obviously, Elton's career was a unique time because when we first started, Elton was always ambitious, wanted to be successful, but none of us had any idea as to exactly how successful it was going to be. And with Elton and Bernie becoming next to Lennon and McCartney, one of the most successful songwriting partnerships of the 20th century. So it's just amazing. So we started playing in clubs and stuff, and it just kept growing and growing. After the Elton John album with the black cover, with Your Song, and that when that broke him, then it just went to bigger places, bigger arenas, and then finally stadiums. It was just huge, So it was very exciting, very exciting. I'm proud to have been a part of that, and proud of my contribution to that body of work in that particular time period, And in 75 and 76, when I joined his band, after he wanted to expand the band, that time period, that was when that was the biggest show on the planet at the time. He was the hottest artist on the time. And we were playing stadiums like 7 days a week, for 2 years. It was just very, very amazing, So, those times were really incredible, and I really enjoyed, working in the studio with him was really great. A lot of people, even though I've worked with a lot of people, often in interviews, people have asked me, well, who's your favorite artist to work with, and I have to say, one of them was definitely Elton John. I love, as a guitar player, I love working with piano players, with keyboard players. And he's a great piano player. And in the early days, we spent a lot of time working on this chemistry between guitar and piano, which is what you hear, especially in the music from what's called the classic period, And so, it was just an exciting time, When I look back on it, it's nothing but good times and good memories, There were times when we were struggling, in the beginning, but we always had this excitement. We couldn't, as soon as him and Bernie had written a song or 2 or 3 songs they put together, we couldn't wait to get in the studio. And I'd be the guy booking the studio time, Dick James. I was running the studio. So it was like, yeah, that's great. Okay, let's get in the studio. There was just this excitement. We couldn't wait to get this music recorded, but we just didn't know how big it was going to become. That's really remarkable thing, So
wow.
that's the best way I can explain that,
A quick follow-up question. I know we talked about this the last time you were on the show. Working with Dick James, what was that like? I know you told me he was a true gentleman, never swore, never did anything, but what was it like working with him?
Well, it was, I had a lot of autonomy because, fortunately, Dick had signed me to the company when I was 16 years old, and gave me the run of the studio as I was 16, 17 years old. I became the A&R guy. He just started a brand new record label. It was called This Records at the time. And so everything was like brand new, coming on the heels or in the shadow of the Beatles. So Dick was the publisher for the Beatles music, you know, and so it was the place to be in terms of the music industry. I mean, there were songwriters knocking on that door, wanting to get their songs, you know, published by the Beatles music publishing company. It was the hot ticket in town. So I was very privileged to have been signed and be part of that as he was developing this new record label, you know. And my job was to find artists to sign to the label. You know, that's how I got Elton and Bernie signed, you know, and all of that's in the documentary. All this stuff's in the documentary. So it was exciting. I mean, I couldn't wait to get in the studio, you know, every day. And for me, it was the place where, to this day, I'm still thankful to Dick for it. He gave myself and Elton and Bernie was a songwriter, so he wasn't a musician, but for me and Elton, he gave us the opportunity to learn our craft in that studio, you know. So that was, you know, money can't buy that kind of a thing.
No.
You know? So I was very privileged, you know, to be able to do that, because all I ever wanted to do was I wanted to learn every aspect of making music, not just the playing of it, but the writing, the arranging, the production of it. You know, there used to be a saying in the studio world of what's going on both sides of the glass. So there's this separation glass between the control room and then the performance room. You know, so I wanted to know what was going on both sides of the glass, if that makes sense, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so Dick gave us the opportunity to do that. He was like a father figure to us. I mean, he knew my father. He was, you know, the generation before us, you know. So he was old school, but you know, he gave us opportunity, which was just priceless, you know. So I was always thankful for it. Yeah, we had disagreements about styles of music and what have you, stuff like that. But you know, we were learning our craft in that studio, and it was exciting. It was fun, you know.
Nice.
Yeah.
Another follow-up question that just popped into my head. You said you were excited to, you know, be recording with Elton and everything.
Mm-hmm.
What song would you say was your favorite to record with him? The one that you had like the most fun with, or the most like had the most energy or something, you know what I mean?
Wow, that's a difficult question to answer, because there's a lot of songs, and I know they've recently, I think it was last year, they released, and I can't remember, but it was the original recordings that we did with songs like Regimental Sergeant Zippo. Elton's company put it out as like a special thing, you know, archive material, you know. It was like it was originally intended to be an album, but never got released, you know. And then finally, after 50 plus years or something, it gets released, and people seem to like it, you know, which is great. But it's us in the very early stages, you know, experimenting and you know, just going through this stuff, you know, just having a great time in the studio. But and then so that was the initial project, and then it went to the Empty Sky album with a different producer, Steve Brown, who unfortunately is not with us anymore. But one of my favorite songs I would have to pick out is a song called Sails off of the Empty Sky album. It's a tune, I think, that was, I like to call it Steely Dan before there was Steely Dan. It was musically, it was ahead of its time, you know, and there's great energy on that. The guitar solo I did was all done live, no overdubbing. You know, it was, let me think, that was an 8-track recording. So very basic, just basically live in the studio. Elton's piano. He was playing electric piano actually on that particular song, and we just came up with this cool sound. Roger Pope was playing some great drums on there. It's a cool tune, and I think it still stands up today.
Wonderful. Now, going back to the documentary, did the documentary bring back memories? Like you said, it's based off your autobiography, but did it bring back memories, like of things like good memories or?
Oh yeah. Well, there is, again, we don't want to give it too much away, but there's great photos and videos of shows, and us doing stuff, So yeah, great memories. I mean, there's a picture in there of when we played Wembley Stadium in England. This is in 1975, and it was the first show with the new band, and at Wembley Stadium, 100,000 people. How about that for your first show? So that was like, wow, we've really made it here. This is like absolutely overwhelming, just incredible. And my dear friend Roger Pope, he took a camera with him and took it on stage with him, the camera, because we were so excited. Because, for us kids growing up in England at the time, Wembley Stadium was like sacred ground. It was in terms of English football, which you'd call soccer over here. So that's where the FA Cup, is now the Premiership League and all this. But this was like sacred sports ground that we all grew up with. And now we're doing it, which I believe was the first rock show at Wembley Stadium. They'd never had bands in there before. And so now, Elton's gone there, and we're doing this big gig with the Beach Boys and some other people who I can't remember now. But and so Roger, at one point, he says, "Hey, look here." And there's a picture of me with my guitar, and I'm turning around to Roger with this big smile on my face, and he snaps a picture, which is just a great picture because there's just me with this beaming smile, and behind me is 100,000 people, and it's like, it was just a classic picture, which is it's in the movie, and I still have it, and that brings back great memories. We couldn't believe we were playing at Wembley Stadium.
What was your reaction when you first stepped out to the stadium, when you first got on stage? Like, what was going through your head at that time?
Just, I was one of those guys, some people suffer from stage fright, things like that. I never did. To me, it was exciting. I couldn't wait to get up there, plug my guitar in, and let's get to it. Let's just get to it, because for me and Roger, it was it was all about the music. Let's just plug it in and let's give it to the people. We just couldn't wait to do that. So it was very, very exciting.
Wonderful. So, buddy, this next question, I'm gonna dissect it a little bit.
Sure.
So, without giving too much away, what can our viewers expect? I'm gonna ask this in like two parts. For one, the diehard fans, like the diehard Elton fans, the ones that have been following your career, what can they expect? And then, what about the fans that maybe aren't, some of our viewers that maybe aren't that familiar with you, that are just learning about you from this interview?
Yeah. Well, let me see. I think obviously there is a strong music history component to it, so that's one thing. On the other hand, it's an interesting story about young guys following their dreams. So there's an inspirational thing there about following your dreams, and that's what we when we met as teenagers, we became friends through a common love of music and pursuing music. We both wanted to be professional musicians and doing something with music. So we used to spend all our money on records and spend all our spare time just listening to records, either at his place or he'd come to my place, and we knew each other's parents, and we were teenage friends, just loving this music. Now, at that time, this is the mid 60s. We met in 1965. So 1965, 66, the music scene was exploding. The Beatles were the biggest thing, and then other things were coming out, Hendrix and all, just so much stuff was going on simultaneously with the explosion of the music scene on the West Coast over here in the US. So there was this cross-pollination of music that was going on, as well as an explosion in the recording arts and sciences. What I mean by that is from 1965 to 1970 was such an explosive time. Music, recording of music, it went from 4-track to 24-track in 5 years, which is crazy, which is just crazy, just amazing, So there was this whole creative explosion going on in the world at that time, at least in London, in England, and in America. And so we were tapped into that. That's all we thought about, And so we were listening to all kinds of music, just absorbing all kinds of ideas, and, him and Bernie, they'd write a song, or I'd write a song, and we say, yeah, we want it to be a bit like this and then a bit like this, And so it was just a very exciting time. And now I've forgotten the gist of your question, but
No. So, you talked about the diehard fan. There was the question of what can diehard fans expect, and then what can someone who's just meeting you for the first time can expect.
Right. So there's the historical component. There's the inspirational component as well. 2 young guys, or include Bernie, 3 of us following our dreams. We dreamed together is what was going on. And Dick James gave us the opportunity to pursue those dreams in the studio. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier you used to spend all your money on records and stuff. Do you still have some of those albums?
Oh gosh, very few. I didn't know. Well, especially now, that was vinyl. I don't do vinyl these days. It's streaming and whatever.
Yeah.
But at one point, I had 3,000 albums.
Wow, that's a collection.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Me and Elton, we used to stock up on this stuff. People would come around my place, and I'd be the DJ spinning this stuff. And yeah.
I have to say, vinyl's making a comeback nowadays.
So I hear, but I'm too old to carry that stuff around now.
You're never too old for vinyl,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, buddy, on top of being a musician, you're also a pastor.
Yeah.
How are things going with the church nowadays?
Beautiful. I mean, we're not a mega church or anything. We're about 300, between 300, 400 people. We have a food bank, which is doing very well. So we feed the poor. We're the 6th largest food bank in Los Angeles County.
Wow.
And it's just real stuff, For me, the gospel of Jesus is the ultimate repair kit for a broken humanity.
Mm-hmm. The one thing that I remember from your story last time, you said a quote to me that said, with rock and roll, there comes a dark path, and if you don't find it, it finds you.
That's right.
That's the one thing I remember, which is why I'm glad you are a pastor today, I'm glad you found God, you found Jesus.
Yeah.
And
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't trade it for anything. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So another question I want to ask you, the title Louder Than Rock. I know it's the title of your autobiography, but how'd you come up with the title?
Well, it's to do with my testimony of hearing God's voice in a hotel room. And I don't want to give that too much of that away, but that's where it's from. Bottom line is that the voice of God can speak to you in a way that's louder than anything else in this world.
Love it. You're absolutely right. Because there have been times. How many times have you, as a pastor, been preaching, and then you hear this voice, and you look around, and like, who said that?
Yeah, right. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So, buddy, the last time you were on the show, I asked you what it means to be someone's buddy. This time, I'm going to switch up the question. I want to know, what's the importance of a buddy today? In your own words.
Oh, boy. Well, it's down to, I equate it with real friendship. Real friendship, a friend, or as you say, a buddy, is somebody that's going to have your best interests at heart, and somebody that in your most troubling of times, there's a trust there that you can open your heart to this person, to your buddy, So a buddy is much more than an acquaintance. A buddy is somebody that you can lean on, you can trust. You can talk to this person if you're hurting in some way. I have a friend of mine who's in our church. I've known him for a long, long time. And right now, he's having a hard time. His wife is dealing with cancer, going through chemo and stuff, And it's funny because she's actually emotionally doing better than he is. But he calls me every day and he's like beside himself, doesn't know what to do, But he calls me because he knows I'm his buddy. He always thanks me for being his friend, but he calls me because he knows I'm going to listen to him.
And that's the importance of buddies right there.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask, do you still keep in touch with some of your buddies from your rock and roll days?
Some, very few, because that's a very different lifestyle. But I do keep in touch with Davey Johnston. We stay in touch. And Kenny Passarelli. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, oh yeah. We stay in touch. Yeah.
Well, tell him Nick says hi.
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah.
Alrighty. I've got one more question for you tonight, buddy.
Yes, sir.
Which is for what we call the ultimate Buddycast buddy question. For anyone out there who wants to be a musician, who wants to dream of being in rock and roll, what's your advice to them?
Boy, I was born into a musical family. My father was a professional musician, and he used to, play a lot of music around the house. So I was strongly influenced by him musically. And he always used to tell me this thing, which for me has always paid off. He said, son, always listen to the best players. That way you're going to learn something. They're going to set the bar. You may not hit the bar, but at least you're going to know where to go, And in doing that, in trying to hit the bar, you're going to learn something. He would say, don't waste your time on listening to people that don't know what they're doing. Listen to the best players, That way you're going to learn something. You'll be influenced correctly. And for me, it paid off. I was able to listen to the best players because in our family, some of the best players would come around to our house because my father knew them. So this was back in the jazz days, Ella Fitzgerald, Dizzy Gillespie, some of the jazz giants from my father's generation. He knew them. He worked with them. He was friends with them. And they would come through our house, when they were on tour in London, and my dad would cook for them. So as a young boy, I was privy to these amazing jam sessions that were going on in our house, with some of the best players in the world, So I used to sit there as a kid going, oh, yeah, man, I want to do some of this,
Nice.
So that would be my advice. I just handed on to you what my father taught me. Listen to the best players,
You're absolutely
in all different genres, Don't just stick with rock and roll. Listen to classical music, listen to classical music and listen to jazz players. Listen to the virtuoso players.
That's an excellent piece, because you're right. Don't just listen to the genre that you want to listen to them all.
Exactly. exactly.
Because each one has something you can learn from it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
All righty, buddy. Well, thank you so much for coming back on Buddycast.
You're most welcome.
Wait, where can we find the documentary again? You said we can find it online, or
if you go to, let me see. Oh boy. Well, you can find there's links are being posted on my Instagram page, Caleb Quaye Official. There's a website, louderthanrock.com. Those would be the best places to go.
louderthanrock.com.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, buddy, I'm wishing the best for you for this documentary. I can't wait to see it myself. I'm very excited for you and wishing you all the best from me and everyone in Buddycast.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, buddy.
Stick around for a minute. We'll chat afterwards.
Okay.
But for my buddies out there, this is my buddy Caleb Quaye. Please check out Louder Than Rock. It sounds very exciting. I'm very hopeful for it. I'm your host, Nick Sorensen. Thank you for joining us on another episode of everybody's favorite show.
Well, the days are going fast, buddy, we've got to make them last, buddy, before they've all gone past, buddy, tune in to Buddycast. But don't feel like it could make it, buddy, here on Buddycast.